Hi everyone, welcome to the very first episode of 2023. Happy New Year, everybody! This is a little bit different in the way I'm doing these intros and outros for the next month. I usually record my intro and outro the day before the episode airs, and then I edit it all together, and then, put it up for the world to see and hear. I am currently, for the month of January, in Lake Placid, New York, where Lake Placid is hosting the World University Games, the Winter Games. These are the second largest international winter games next to the Winter Olympics. It's university-aged athletes. And I am Team Canada's Chief Medical Officer, so I am not in my home studio. I am recording this in December 2022, so it's not yet 2023. But I needed to pre-record it because I'm not in my studio. I'm in Lake Placid doing doctoring things. I was also the Chief Medical Officer for the 2021 Winter Games with Team Canada in Lucerne, which were meant to happen, but then were canceled at the very last minute due to COVID. Now, I 100% agree with this decision, but it was a very gut-wrenching, upsetting, sad time given all the work we had put in, the athletes had put in. But those 2 months of me being very sad of not getting to go to Switzerland and not helping to support Team Canada, I kind of sat around my house. What do I do with my life? Guess what came out of that? This podcast. Hooray! So happy 2023, everybody. Hello from Lake Placid, where hopefully I am right now. Hopefully COVID hasn't shut down these games. I probably just jinxed it. Anyways, happy 2023, everybody. This is going to be an amazing year, and I am kicking it off with one of the most incredible, intense episodes I have had, honestly. My guest this week is Alvin Cowan. Alvin was a football player turned now actor. You may recognize him from television shows such as Westworld and one of my favorites, Better Call Saul. He's from Texas, and he played football in Texas. So we talk a lot about not just football culture, but Texas football culture. Texas male toxic masculinity football culture. He then played quarterback for Yale. We talk about the football culture there, and then he decided he needed to pursue something creative. There was a drive in him. There was that fire that we all feel as second act actors, and he had headed to LA, and that's where he's been since, acting and writing. He is an incredibly creative human being, but it's fascinating, again, as a prior athlete myself and someone who works with athletes, to hear the correlations between high elite level sport performance and acting performance. I am so excited for you to hear Alvin's story. Please enjoy Alvin Cowan. Story. How did you get into the acting business?
That's a good question and a long story that I'll try to make reasonably short. Which is, I was a football player growing up. I played professional football briefly, and when I say briefly, I mean very briefly. And when I was done, I kind of didn't know what I wanted to do, and I ran off to Eastern Europe in this job that I had gotten kind of told about and made to sound very glamorous and, hanging out on yachts with Saudi princes and all this stuff. Well, it turned out that job was not what I thought it was. And I had a girlfriend at the time who was finishing up her master's at USC. And I spent about a year plus in Eastern Europe, in Romania and then Albania, kind of running a little bit, a little depressed and trying to figure out who I was if I wasn't playing football. I had dedicated most of my life to playing football. And when I decided that I was done in Eastern Europe, or when I kind of got ran out of Eastern Europe, which is a whole other story we can get into if you want, but it was either like go back home to Austin, Texas, where I'm from, and have an insurance job and 2 kids and a picket fence, or go visit my girlfriend in LA. And So I spent 10 days in LA, and when I got done, by the time I got done, I decided that I wanted to move out there, and so I came back to Austin, grabbed my stuff, and moved to LA. And 2 weeks later, she and I broke up, and so I was in LA, not knowing anybody, and kind of looked around and was like, well, I guess I'm 24 years old. What do you do when you're 24 years old, single, and don't know a soul in LA? Well, you start acting. So um, it was kind of by default. I took an acting class just as a way to kind of keep busy, really. And what I didn't mention was the part of in Eastern Europe where I was doing a little bit of production, so I had a little bit of production experience, and kind of was figured I was in LA once, and I might as well try out the entertainment industry, because if I move somewhere else, I'm probably not going to have the opportunities that I have, and that was 20 years ago. So I ended up, yeah, kind of falling in love with the acting side of the business, and that led to writing and producing and podcast production, and so I have my hands in many pots now, but certainly acting is the first and greatest love.
Was there anything that you noticed that you've been able to pull from your not just professional football career, but just, like life before you got into acting?
Yeah.
Any life skills that you've now noticed, oh, I'm glad I had that life skill now?
Yeah, another great question. I think there's a lot of similarity in terms of the supply demand, if you will, in professional sports and acting, right? Like there's an oversupply of people who want to do it, and a minimal demand for needs to fill those jobs. I mean, there's 96 professional football quarterbacks approximately, and half of those positions are already taken by the time you're trying to get in to the game. So in any one year, there's a turnover of 30 guys maybe that make a roster, fresh out of college, and there's probably 200 guys that want those jobs. So it reminds me a little bit of the audition process, in the sense that, and especially nowadays with self tapes, I mean, it's a global process, and you're competing against hundreds, if not thousands of actors. Of course, we as actors don't like to look at it as competition, and I think there's truth to that. That's different than football, in the sense that, as an actor, it's it's your brand, and you put out your art, and sometimes you get it and sometimes you don't. So I think the parallel there in terms of a mindset has always kind of helped me. I also think that football was a very regimented workload. It was very designed, and you had coaches, and you were in specific places at specific times to do specific activities, and um, it took me a while to apply that model to acting, because acting is a collaborative art. You need somebody to work with, and so I had a hard time finding out how to kind of work on my own, but eventually kind of learned, and part of that was honestly writing. And when I started writing, I learned how to kind of move the ball forward as an actor, without, you know, and I guess what I'm saying is put together a schedule that had me working it at as a job, as a profession. And I felt like, when you're not on set, that to me is always the hardest time to figure out what you're doing with yourself, and how you're kind of developing, and how you're growing as an actor. And class can be helpful in that way, of course. Obviously that's been challenging with the pandemic, but um, uh, I have found that's been the biggest transferable skill, has really been understanding what it looks like to go after a dream, go after a goal, and what the kind of workload needs to be to try to achieve that goal, or that dream. And it wasn't a direct correlation between football, because I had all this support system and had all this experience, but eventually I was able to kind of collate that experience and then transfer it to, like, here's what it would look like as an actor to work at it as a job. And I think that to the extent that I've had success, a lot of it has been as a result of kind of approaching acting as something that needs to be honed every day, a skill that needs to be
Mm.
in my calendar daily, whether that's picking up a monologue, whether that's, a real audition, whether that's self-submitting, whether that's, business, admin type stuff. I have acting time in my schedule every single day.
Mm.
Um, Honestly, if I didn't, I think it to me feels like the seed of everything else. It feels like I can't be a writer, I can't be a producer, I can't be a good father, I can't be a good husband if that part of my soul isn't taken care of. And so
Mm.
the performance element of it is still important to me.
Mm. It's interesting that you mentioned that kind of regimented and putting it in your day be as like that's what you would do if it was your job, which
Yeah,
it is, right? I have a meeting between this time and this time. I'm acting between this time and this time.
yeah,
It's funny if I chat with people, and this is a broad generalization, people
sure.
who've been acting for longer, like the kind of people who've been acting all the time, they've kind of countered me saying, oh, well, that takes the creative spontaneity out of, like, that takes the art out of acting and turns it into, like, the science of acting. And then, like, that kind of destroys the beauty of the art and blah, 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 blah,
Yeah, yeah.
blah. What are your thoughts on that? Because I'm of your vein, right? I need the logical, segmented, like regiment. But I kind of worry, like, oh, is that getting rid of the creative spontaneity?
Yeah. It's funny because I read you know I, I'm dabbling, as I mentioned, in a lot of different creative professions, and so writing, for instance, is a very solo pursuit. Right? You can write without the help of anybody else, and as a writer, it's the opposite kind of culture, right? Like when you talk to other writers, they're like, you've got to show up at the page and write regardless. Like the difference between an amateur and a professional is a professional writes every day. Like there's all this like
Mm.
philosophy as writers that is counter to exactly what we hear as actors, which is kind of, I agree, like a lot of people hear that, right? And a lot of people believe that. And um, I think there is room for spontaneity as an actor, but I just don't think that reflects the real world. Like if I book a multi-episode co-star or multi-episode guest star or a regular, like, do I feel like acting every day? Like, I don't think so. And
Yeah.
so if I'm just like that lends itself to me to being the actor who wants to stay in their trailer until they feel ready to be inspired when the whole crew is waiting
Mm.
on you. And that's a bit of an exaggeration, but it's like, to me, craft is being able to turn on and turn off, your character. And it, I think that, at least for me personally, it's a lot easier to ramp up than it is to ramp down. So I actually struggle with
Mm.
the opposite effect, which is more of a depression or a letting go of the character once I'm done in that particular. Like I put so much energy and effort into that work, and then to let it go, I actually struggle with that. And my wife would tell you I'm kind of a crazy nut after I get off the set. um, so yeah, I mean, I hear that, and I think it would be nice to me if I could act only when I'm inspired to act, or I could wait for inspiration. I just don't think that reflects my life in the business. I think auditions
Mm.
come when they come, jobs come when they come, and you know, I, I don't think that my output would be, at least for me, my output would not be regular or good. Just because I wouldn't be practicing the craft very often. I would, I'd be waiting for inspiration most of the time. I, I it's nice when those connect. Those do connect occasionally when you're inspired or you get a part that really reflects your brand or you're very interested in, or there's a part of it that you really connect to, and you can really dive in there deep. And that to me is the drug, right? Like that's what we're all seeking, is that connection of inspiration and art. But I don't know that. I mean, that happens. to me, at least for me, 30 or 40% of the time. And the other time, I'm running a
Mm-hmm.
business. And for me to run a
Yeah.
business, I have to approach it as a regular, you know, I've got to be there every day and show up and work on my business. And, I will
Mm-hmm.
admit that sometimes that looks different. Sometimes I'll have like a audition on the books and I'm just not feeling it, so I'll go do some admin instead, and or I'll
Yeah.
open up something. I have a lot of different ways that kind of warm me up to kind of get into something. I don't think that when I show up to be an actor or when I show up to be a writer, like I'm rarely ever in the mood to do those things. And like for me as a writer, like the first step is listening to a song, and like there's certain
Mm.
songs that I associate with the scripts, right? And so I listen to that song and I open the script and I agree to myself. My commitment to myself is I'm going to read the last scene I wrote. Like that's it. That's the only agreement, right? And so I'm listening to a song and I'm reading the script, and the next thing you know, ideas start to flow, and there's next thing you know, I'm writing a paragraph and a page, and I see it the same way as an actor. It's like um, all I have to do is pick up the script, right? Like I just have to pick it up and I have to read it, and that's to me is like the first step. Is like a little bit of music, maybe a scent is really big for me. So I like to light a candle or burn some sage or something, and there's something about that that gets me in the artist inspiration phase. And so I have a scent and I
Mm-hmm.
pick up the script and I read the script, and that's all I'm agreeing to do to myself. Like I've got this time in my schedule, but I'm only agreeing to that. And um, yeah, usually by the time I picked up the script and that song is over, I'm interested in doing a little bit more work. So again, like to me, I think craft is that ability, right? It's that ability to kind of turn yourself on, and then, like I said, on the backside, be able to turn it off, which again I struggle with much more than the turning on part.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which I want to touch on later because I just came off a big
Mm.
play, and I'm having a very tough time turning it
Yeah,
off. It's very interesting. But I wanted to say, were you always creative growing up? Like, were you a creative kid?
that's yeah. It was such a latent interest in that, like I was always a kid who liked art. Like I was always a kid who was drawing, who was building with Legos, who was out playing imaginary, stuff with friends, building in the woods and running around and pretending like you're a cowboys and Indians or whatever it was, And so I had I think a very creative brain and a very fulfilled imaginary life. um, but I think that the culture of sports and certainly the culture of you know Texas masculinity, if you will, kind of dampened that, and certainly the football culture that I grew up in, that was kind of, at least the way I felt, and I don't know that this is actually true or whether it was just how I felt about it, but there was kind of like a look down of like that's for sissies kind of thing, and
Mm-hmm.
and so I never got to like, it was always something like, even I went to Yale for college, and very obviously prestigious acting program. And I remember I was playing football in college at Yale, and I remember kind of walking around campus and always passing by the drama department and knowing that there were famous people who had come out of that drama department and kind of like looking around, but never really being able to say, yeah, I want to go in there and check that out, because like one of my good friends, he was on the football team with us at Yale, and he went and auditioned for the one of the plays that the drama department was, and he ended up, they needed bodies because they only had a certain amount of students, and so he ended up in like the ensemble, like being like a soldier who carried a spear in some play, like no lines, like an extra. And the first day that the production went up in New Haven, like 30 football players showed up and sat in the front row. And when he came up on stage, they pointed and laughed at him. And
Oh
you
my
like,
god.
as an actor, like that's awful, right? Like that would be awful. But that's the culture of football, right? And I'm not saying it's
Mm.
useful. I am saying it's useful in producing football players, but it's not useful in, you know, so many other ways. And so just to tell that story, like that was kind of my experience growing up as a as somebody who had a latent creative curiosity and wasn't really allowed to express that, so much so that my first acting teacher told me that I had armor on that I had to take off to be an artist. And I
Mm.
think it took me 5 to 10 years to really kind of be comfortable in, expressing that way. Even to this day, I'm no different than anybody else. I'll put something out on the internet or whatever, and as an actor, and I'll do a monologue and I'll put it on Twitter or whatever, and I still have a little bit of that, like, the football player is going to be on the front row laughing at me kind of thing. So long-winded answer,
Mm-hmm.
but all to say, yes, it's always been who I am, but I think I've only really stepped into that skin and that voice within the last 5 or 10 years.
And what's been helpful, kind of stepping into that and kind of getting rid of the term I've heard is emotional restraint, that kind of hardened
Mm,
shell. And what's been helpful for you?
that's I I think if you talk to my acting teachers and mentors over the years, I'm still a restrained actor. My emotions are still bubbling underneath. I'm not going to be, the Jim Carrey big actor, right? Like I'm always going to be a little more subtle. And I think part of that is that shell that still exists. It's part of who I am, and I think accepting that that's part of who I am as an actor is has been useful. I think, again, I go back to the conversation we were having about discipline, which is just knocking at the door every single day to try to open that process up. Um, uh, and that looks like practice. That looks like getting on stage and failing. That looks like having a teacher who is actually pushing you healthily and to go further, to go deeper. My most recent teacher, who I adored, and unfortunately recently passed away,
Oh.
she opened up Shakespeare to me, and like I had never done Shakespeare. I wasn't, I was playing football, so I wasn't classically trained, or and that always felt like this way over there thing, like this thing that actors who went to drama school and did, and she made it accessible to me, and I think more than anything, like that's an experience that grew me emotionally, or opened me up emotionally as an actor. Just the challenge of that language and that level of work was, um, it forced a yeah, a growth. And then I also think, for me, self-care has been
Mm.
huge. I meditate regularly. I have a pretty good diet and exercise routine. Um, all of those things to feel comfortable in your own skin, to be able to put on that that actor opening, or being able to fully expose yourself. I think you have to be comfortable in your own skin, and I consider that just as much a part of the routine of an actor as learning lines, or studying a part, or putting a play up, or doing an audition. Like I just think without that balance of figuring out ways to take care of your mind and your soul and your body, like, um, I don't think you show up fully because you're withholding something, or and B, I think it's terribly challenging on your mental health.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Was was there a time, I know you said, your transition from being in Europe now to LA, what else do you do but be in LA and be an actor? But besides, like, now your situation has changed, was there anything else that you noticed at that time was kind of the kind of click on that said, okay, I'm not going to be a pro football player. I'm going to kind of step out of this like Texas masculinity and embrace my more creative side. Was there anything that you noticed, like what caused that?
Ah, I've never thought of that. What caused that? Um, I think that I've never thought of this, but I think the my answer to that question would be being alone,
Hmm.
um, and um, really feeling kind of rock bottom after that
Right.
breakup, and the combination over that 18 months of losing my first dream, my dream of pro football, kind of falling back and trying to figure myself out, and then losing a girlfriend and really being alone in this massive city. um I think that caused, like, that would be one of the areas where I say, like, that was a rock bottom for me, and it caused a renaissance, a transformation, in the sense that, like, I don't really have anything much that I'm excited about or passionate about, or you know forward thinking, what I want to achieve or goals or anything like that. I was just kind of wandering and a bit lost. And of course, LA is a great place to be lost, but um, uh, I think when you're at that place, you know, you start asking questions of, like, what do I
Mm.
want? Like, who do I want to be? And I had some fortunate, people come into my life at that time, some mentors. I joined an acting class that really felt like a community. I found some friends there, and people who were just starting out as well, or didn't have a ton of experience. And we had this kind of, one of those acting teachers that's a little, kind of, strict, and, kind of, you'd show up, and, if your scene sucked, she'd let you know that it sucked. Um, and so there was this merry band of us that it was like us versus the teacher in some ways,
Hmm.
and so I think finding that community where it was safe to, like, because again, like, her teaching style mimicked football coaches,
Mm.
so it was the combination of kind of, like, hitting that rock bottom and thinking, what do I want? And then finding out, oh, there's other people here that like this too. I'm not this weird Texas feminine guy that likes to act, right. Like, it became, that was a permission for me to start to express, I
Mm.
think, and start to go down the path. And again, I think that path was a long road. um, it was not overnight for me. I especially in that environment, with a strict teacher, there was a lot of questioning and a lot of frustration over those next few years. But yeah, I think that's it was really yeah a really a reshifting of identity,
Mm.
on a core level, and finding out more about, like I said, I think that bass note was always there. It just wasn't allowed. It was a voice inside of me that was always kind of whispering, but was never allowed to be heard.
Mm.
And I think that the rock bottom and the mentors and the community allowed me to say, hey, it's okay to let this voice out. And um, that was a process, but one that I think in some ways, like, really, I don't mean to, like, dramatize it, but really saved me.
Yeah.
I mean, I needed. I think that voice would have eaten at me, had I gone into a corporate job. I think I always, I would have had huge regrets. I might have, drank a lot more. Like, I think it would have just gnawed inside. And fortunately, for me, I somehow found a way to, let it out.
Is there anything that has surprised you about the entertainment industry since being in it?
Um, yes. And it's kind of the same thing on both the positive and negative side, which is like how
Mm.
wonderful people can be, like um how collaborative, like what great things can be made. Um, I did a little part on Westworld,
Okay.
you know, and
I love that show.
and and see uh, the
Mm.
massiveness of that production was just awe-inspiring. You know, like I've been on some pretty big sets. Yeah, that doesn't matter, but the and I don't name drop Westworld other than to say like it was a
Mm.
massive production. I mean, there were three different crews and different locations, and I mean, all the bells and whistles, you know, the cranes and the lightings and the, you know, and um, seeing the you know the full scale of what's possible, and feeling like you're a part of something that is really meaningful and people enjoy, or gives people something to think about, or you know, causes them to emote in some way. I don't know, there's a contribution there, element there, that I think is really important for me as an actor, to feel like there's meaning within what I'm doing. And I think that when I enjoy it, acting the most, it's when I feel like I'm contributing to a conversation, or you know, causing reaction in
Mm.
an audience. And so just seeing a group of people come together on a massive scale to produce something with the intention of contributing, or giving a gift
Mm.
to an audience. And that can be in a black box theater of 90 people. It can also be on a massive Westworld set. But that that always keeps me in awe, and kind of makes me feel like a little kid, of like, I can't believe we get to do this. Like, you see this, like, we, like, look around, like, look at what we're doing, like, and I get yoked up on that. Like, that to me has always, it always surprises
Mm.
me. And on the negative side, you know, people can
Yeah.
be assholes. And I don't think that just because you're famous, or just because you're making a lot of money, that gives you a right, you know, to denigrate another
Mm.
human, you know. So and that happens in this business, you know. People are hyped up on their power. I call somebody a long time ago told me that Hollywood is just high school with money. And I think that's true. It's like these
Yeah.
little cliques and bands of, you know, here's the geeks over here, here's the comedians over here, here's the rich kid, you know, like, and it's true. And yeah, I don't, that's the part of it that has continued to surprise me, that, you know, and there are, I think that is massively overstated. I think that most of the people that I have been fortunate to work with, whether famous or not, have been really, really quality human
Mm.
beings. But you know, and I think people like to publicize the
Of
bad
course.
apples, because they're fun to
Yeah.
talk about, right? And it's drama, and it fills the newspapers when, you know, somebody goes off on their crew chief or whatever,
Yeah.
you know, like, but um, I have found on a vast majority scale that most people working in the entertainment industry are hugely collaborative, helpful, grateful, loving people. Um, so I guess that always surprises me when you run across somebody who's an asshole.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I had that conversation with someone just recently as well too. And you know, you could wax poetic about like, why does it happen? When does it happen? Like, when do these really nice people turn into assholes? Like, what's the level of money, right?
Yeah,
But this industry,
yeah,
even though there are tons of people wanting to do it, it is still so tiny and small. And so as soon as you kind of, the word gets out that you're, you know, not fun to work with, I don't know. I just don't see why is there an why. I don't know. There's no end game. What's the end game there if you're an asshole? I don't get it.
yeah. I just, I mean, I guess if it, like, we hear about the people who are assholes who are famous, right? And I think, you know, you don't hear about the people who are assholes who aren't famous, and I think that's because they don't have the leverage to be an
There you go.
asshole,
Yeah.
and so people don't work with
Yep.
them, right? Like, if you show up and you're a problem and you don't have the like I said, the leverage to be a problem, then like people are just gonna be like, well, I won't work with
Yeah,
you
there's
anymore,
100 people in the wings
and then
waiting to take your job.
exactly, exactly. So I feel like we only hear about celebrity assholes because they're the only people that can kind of get away
Mm.
with it, and and you know, I have some empathy for that, I guess, because fame is a fickle thing, and I think it does something to your brain. You know, I'm in football, in acting. You know, I've worked with known, famous people, and that's a weird thing, man. Like that level of attention, that level of I mean, people that names that you would know, have told me stories about the experience of fame that would make your skin crawl,
Mm.
and people handle that differently, like their values and their makeup. And I'm not I'm not suggesting that it's okay that they be assholes to people on sets and around them. I'm because I don't think that's okay. But I think until you've stepped in somebody's shoes that's
Mm.
famous, that has to deal with, like, I won't tell his name, but I have a friend who's the brother of a very famous actor, somebody that everybody knows, and he's separated from the family and to some degree. And again, I'm friends with a brother of a very famous football player, also kind of separated from the family to
Mm.
some degree. And there's a lot of parallels there between the football and the actor.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting about that to me is, like, I just don't think the family understands what their lives are like.
Mm.
And so there's this disconnect between, the day to day of a famous actor and what they have to deal with, that is just not relatable for their family, a normal person. How do you, the way that person walks through the world, is different, and
Yeah.
that fame comes with a cost. And I think, again, no empathy for being an asshole, and I honestly no empathy for fame. I think we would, we're all to some degree chasing that, and wouldn't mind being at that level of success. I don't
Fair.
mean to denigrate that, but I do think that, um, it's a burden to some people, and I think that carrying that, people just don't understand what that day to day is like.
Yeah.
So, you know, there is a little bit of empathy on my side for when they lose control,
Mm-hmm.
because I think the pressure of that is a lot.
Yeah. I think you're 100% correct. And I was just thinking about, I think there's a reason why actors, well, and other just famous people, marry famous people or partner up with famous people,
Yeah,
because nobody else could understand what they're going through on a day-to-day basis, and it would be difficult.
yeah,
And it's not just like partnering romantically, it's partnering friends.
yeah,
Like, how do
yeah.
you trust someone who literally can only sympathize, they can't empathize with you? And I think
I,
it's
I
everywhere in every industry, right? I think about, like, I'm in medicine. Most doctors marry other
yeah,
doctors because it's like, yeah,
yeah,
nobody understands what it's like, right? It's super dramatic, but it's part of it. It's part
yeah.
of who you are in your life. Yeah,
I
interesting.
mean, wouldn't you just love to be a fly on the wall when, like, Brad Pitt, George Clooney, and Julia Roberts are in their trailer?
Yeah,
Like, I would just love to know, what's that conversation.
right?
I mean, like, because like you said, like, I'm sure, you know like, those are the only people in the world who
Yeah.
understand what the other person is,
Mm-hmm.
and so I would just love to know what they're talking
Yeah,
about,
right?
like, and and it's a good point. It's a really good point. Like, I again don't condone them being assholes about anything, but I also think that, very few people in the world know what that's like.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for people wanting to either switch careers into acting, or, again, not just acting, everything you're doing, writing, producing, just trying to be more creative? from a life that wasn't as creative?
Well, I don't know that I feel like I should be giving anybody advice on anything.
Hello, I've had 2 lines in a Hallmark movie. What am I doing with an acting podcast?
Yeah, I'll give it my best effort, but to all of your listeners, please take it with a grain of salt because I'm just an idiot on the internet.
Aren't we all?
Yeah. More and more so,
Right?
right?
Yeah.
More and more, we're just yeah. Um, yeah. I think looking back over all the experiences, if I had it to do all over again, I think the biggest thing I would have done is take care of the money aspect of my professional life before in the start before creative. And what I mean by that is I think it's a lot to put pressure on your art to provide for your life. I think it hurts your art, especially early on when you're first kind of starting and you're, fumbling and failing. And, I was one of these people that, moved to LA and was like, well, I'm going to be a big star. I don't need another job, and here I was 3 years into it and barely paying rent. And, kind of that pressure of survival level, base needs being met, I think is a lot to put on your art early on. And so to me, if I had it to do all over again, I would have found a job that allowed me to pursue it, but would have taken care of my basic needs so that I wasn't putting pressure on an audition or on a job to, pay me enough money to pay my rent or put food in my belly that month. I think those first few years, I would have just given myself the space to say, hey, this is the side thing right now. This is the thing that puts food on my table. And, I'm going to learn how to do this. And so I wish I had, I feel like we as artists, especially as actors, feel this like pressure to, at least I did, to like make it, which I don't even know what that means. um, uh, and I wish I hadn't put that pressure on my art because I felt like it was detrimental to my art. And it was only really when I stabilized financially that I was able to really, what we were talking about earlier, take risks and open up to, the creative energy, and really expose myself because I didn't feel like I had to get this job to be able to pay for my life. And the other thing I would say, again, an idiot on the internet giving advice, but is like dabbling in the different fields and having it. I mean, I expect that that's pretty common advice, but like the writing has informed my acting, the producing has informed my acting, like the packaging of projects has informed my acting. Just having a tacit understanding of what all of those other people are doing, and the pressures that they understand or that they're feeling. Or, I mean, sometimes I'll get a script and honestly, it's pretty bad. and yet I know what that's like as a writer, right? Like I know what it's like to sit in front of that computer screen with a blank page and try to produce something. And so there's a, as an actor, as I sit in front of that script and I look at it, I'm like, this was somebody trying, man. Like you need to show up for them and make it beautiful for them because this is their art and you're in service of that script. And even if you don't, let go of your misconceptions, like that to me, like as a writer has like, yeah, like informed me as an actor where there's just a level of preciousness or a level of love that you have to bring to your work as an actor in service to what that other person is bringing. And I just don't think I knew that inside out until I sat in front of a blank page for 2 hours and wrote some really bad text and, had looked at it and was like, oh, this is hard.
Yeah.
And so I just think that like exploring where, we talked about inspiration, exploring where you're inspired in, you know, I have found that when acting is slow, writing is fast. When writing and acting are slow, producing is fast. When, producing and writing are slow, acting is fast. So I have found that the diversity of skill sets has kept me more busy creatively, and to the end of what I said at the beginning, which is it's allowed me to transition out of that hobby phase and make creativity as a whole my profession, because I don't make enough money to make a living just as an actor, just as a writer, just as a producer. But you combine all of those things, and I make a pretty good living. Um, as I said, acting is still the source; it's still the seed. But um, it's allowed me to not have to have that other job because I've diversified the skill sets professionally enough to live in creativity. And again, that inspires, that fuels. At least I'll be working on a podcast as a producer or something, and I'm dabbling in script, and I'm looking at storyline, and that inspires me. At least I'm in creative work day to day, all day, as opposed to the separation, which was how I started and how I think people should start. But I'm not over here, I don't know, being a personal trainer or having to work at a restaurant, or you name it, and the creativity is this small box that I get to open occasionally. It's like day to day is all creative now, and that's because there's a multiple skill sets that I've monetized, so that I've got different streams of income coming in as the inevitable ups and downs of the business come.
That's great advice. And I, again, just kind of going back to what we were talking about before about why do actors become assholes, and that whole empathizing with who's going to empathize with these people. It's the same thing with now you know exactly how it feels to be in the shoes of a writer, right? So
Yeah.
what an advantage. Well, not advantage because like everyone can do it, but no, not that many people do it, right? But yeah, like what like that's so good, like you were saying, for your acting, because now you have not just sympathy for like, oh yeah, sorry, your script is bad. It's empathy, right? And that is such a key emotion for actors. And it's not coming from like, I learned how to be empathetic. It's in acting class. It's you're like really empathetic.
Yeah. You know where else I've seen it show up as well is in the audition process. There's been a shift in my head that I think has come from being a writer, and you'll hear a lot of actors be like, oh, go be the reader for a casting office, or go intern at a casting office, and you'll learn what it looks like. And it's like, yeah, that's great, and I'm sure that helps some people. It didn't help me. I did it. um, all I saw was you know the ego in me saying, well, I should walk in and audition for this part.
Right.
And
Yep.
the truth is I probably wouldn't have been any better or any worse than any of the people that we saw. But um, I think one of the things that has really shifted in me is in that regard is to see, like, if you talk to writers, if you talk to showrunners, if you talk to they are, again, mass generalization, but by and whole introverts, right? Somebody who's able to sit in a room all day looking at a computer, living in an imaginary world in their own head, that takes a certain type of person. And so all they want is the actor to come into that audition and beautify what they've written or bring to life what they've written. And for me personally, that knowledge has allowed me to show up and give my art in an audition the way that I see it, without fear of, rejection or booking a part. Like, I may not be, the flavor of coffee that they're looking for that day, but for me, it's given me permission to say, I'm gonna, like, this guy seems quirky, and like I'm kind of quirky. Like, I'm gonna influence this in a different way, and I'm gonna, like, maybe I'll do something interesting. And some of the people that see that appreciate that, and some of the people that see that, like, book me, and some of the people that see that say I'm not right for that part. But I think that is what success as an actor looks like to me, is showing up and bringing your full art to the table. And I think that knowing what writers just their heart sings when they see an actor on tape or in, like that level of when they're like, oh, they that's it, and I think that knowledge has given me permission in auditions to play. um
Mm.
and I now feel like, to me, the audition process is when you can start making little short films that are for you and kind of private for you and like your eyes only. When you show up and you have somebody that maybe is a reader that you trust, and like you guys are making a little short film, and it's like, don't care whether anybody sees this. Like the process, people talk about the process. Well, what does that mean? Like for me, the way that I've reinterpreted that is I'm making a short film for me. And
It's
like
great.
I'm gonna make this little short film and I'm gonna send it off, and but like I like it. Like at the end of the day, when I look at it and I watch it, am I like, yeah, I like that, And if I can get to that place, like, yeah, that's good. Like I'm good with that. Like I don't care what happens, like because I don't control that. But like when I make this little short film and I watch it and it kind of makes me chuckle, or
Yeah.
makes me afraid or makes me smile or whatever, like that to me is auditioning, and that to me is success in auditioning when it makes me happy, and makes me proud or fulfilled or emote or it affects me. Yeah. So long-winded answer, but to say writers, the writing process has taught me that when I write, I just want an actor to come in and knock it out of the freaking park. Like I
I
want to
love
see
that.
them bring them and bring something that I didn't even think of and wow me. And
Mm.
the way that again has influenced as an actor is to say, yeah, I'm gonna do what makes me kind of, excited.
And so I love that one gives you the control back in this industry that we have no control, right?
Yeah.
But two, for some weird reason, and I don't know why actors have this, it's that feeling that everyone is the antagonist against them.
Yeah.
Casting, writing, producing, directing. Probably because it's like we book so few of the auditions that we get.
Yeah.
But I love that in the fact that how would you know that it's the exact opposite? Casting, writing, producing, directing, they all want you to be the part. They're excited. They're like, yes, please be this person. We're so excited for you to see you to work your magic. How else would you know that that's actually how people are feeling if you're not that person? If you've never been in that position, I
Yeah.
love that. That I'm so like inspired by that. That's exciting.
We just get so little feedback, I mean,
Yeah.
we send these tapes off and we don't hear anything, and and
Mm.
and so, um not affiliated, no benefit to me, but there's a guy named Michael Kostroff, and he runs this class called Audition Psych 101, which I took, and is all about the psychology of auditioning. He
Mm.
has a bit of a mantra that he says helps him, which is, I'm not going to get this job, or I'm not going to book this job or whatever. And so he says that idea of like releasing the need to book the job allows him to come and show up fully and play with the job. I really, really recommend his class, but um, for me, it's a little bit of a twist on that, in the sense that like I think I have to fulfill me, before I can worry about anything else. And to me, um, just making art is in and putting it out there is success as an artist. Like I don't
Mm.
control the rest, and like you said, and casting directors, and you go to workshops or with producers, writers, whatever, they all say that. They're all like, yeah, we're just looking for you to come in and knock it out, like we're your teammate. And you're like, yeah, but then you don't give me any feedback when I don't. Like, are you really on my team? Like, and so it's this. We hear that, and yet as actors, I know how. I felt was like, yeah, I don't believe that. Like, I think, I,
Yeah, totally.
I think that you probably feel that way. You are looking for that part, and you probably feel like you're on my team. But the fact is, you don't have the time or energy to act like a partner on my team. So,
Right. Right.
the feeling as an actor is that person isn't on my side, and like you said, you feel like you're, this dancing bear, that's supposed to come in
Yeah.
and dance for all these people, and then hopefully like your dance, and it's like, I think a lot of it is about, like you said, like finding a way to make it work for you, and for me that has been, I'm here on this earth for a certain period of time, and I want, I need to express what's inside me. And I think going all the way back to that transition and that dark moment, that was really the decision. The decision was,
Mm.
I can't hide this anymore. This person has to be expressed. And it's taken me a long time to do that in a skilled way, but that's what auditioning has become, is just an opportunity for me to show up and create art that makes me feel expressed and fulfilled. And I've seen much better results professionally as a result of that.
Do you have any memorable or favorite on-set stories?
Sure. Couple name drops in there, so, which I
Go
hate,
for
but
it.
uh, uh, I booked a small part on that Bradley Cooper film, American Sniper, that Clint Eastwood
Mm.
directed, and it was ultimately cut from the film. But two stories there. It was 5 lines, right? So not a huge part, but a huge production. And I mean, I'd be an extra on a Clint Eastwood film. So
Yeah.
like, so two things that were kind of interesting there. One was, I did my scene. I was, kind of in awe of everything, maybe a little too excitable. But Clint Eastwood's a legend, and like, he's, if outside of Paul Newman, is probably my favorite of all time. So I wanted to say hello and like thank him. Just, I had been up for a much bigger part that they ultimately gave to the real person in the real Navy SEAL who had done that, and so
Wow.
I think this was kind of a little, hey, you didn't get the big part, but let's bring you on the film and make your day kind of thing, and um, so I just wanted to see Clint Eastwood and say thanks. Well, he went to his bus and was there for like 2 hours. So here I am, like, done with my workday, hanging out, and I think all the PAs and the producers were kind of like, "Get this guy out of here." um, but they were cordial, and he finally came out, and I went up to him, and it was just one of those Hollywood moments where it's like you're talking to Clint Eastwood. And I said, Mr. Eastwood, I just want to thank you, man. That was really great. And it just stuck in my mind because he turned on that little Eastwood voice, Dirty Harry, and he was just like, "Yeah, it was a great scene,"
Oh my
and
god.
and like, that just made my life,
Oh.
like, as an actor,
Yep.
like, Clint Eastwood told me it was a great scene, all 4 of my lines, man.
Oh.
Like, yes, I could live on that for a while.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you this, talking about good people in the industry, little known thing, you know, that scene got cut, right? And it got cut
Hmm.
for a number of reasons, most of which I think were story, and totally get it. But I got a letter from Robert Lorenz and Eastwood himself before the film came out, just saying, "Hey, just wanted you to have a heads up that the scene was cut. I'm sorry. We really appreciated your work and all of that." And signed by them. And I got that framed in my house. And you know, like, you wonder who is Robert Lorenz, who is Clint Eastwood, like, why have they been so successful? It's that stuff, right? And
Yes.
people don't know that. Like, that's my little, like, that meant the world to me, that I'm not out telling
Yeah.
everybody to go watch American Sniper and look for me, even in my 2 lines, like, it saved me some promotional embarrassment, and also just a good solid like thing to do to an actor, like an understanding of what's important
Oh
to an
yeah.
actor. And like he didn't have to do that, like most people don't, right? I mean, most people
Yeah.
who when they get cut out of something, they find out when it shows up.
Hmm.
So I just think like that's going back to what we were talking about, just being good to people. Like it surprises me not that Clint Eastwood has had the career he's had if his care and attention to a 4-line co-star level actor on a scene that got cut out is any indication of who he is as a person, then it's not surprising that he's a legend and had all the success that he's
Yeah.
had, because when you treat people that way, it comes back and it benefits you, and people want to
Absolutely.
work with you. I mean, I'd work with him just because of Clint Eastwood, but on top of that, like, you know, like the way he treated
Yeah.
me when he didn't have to, he just reflects who he is, and you want to be around that.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's wonderful. Do you have anything that you are looking forward to coming up this year?
Yeah. I have a pretty big guest star that I have to say the extremely arrogant and annoying thing of that I can't talk about much, because I did sign an NDA,
Totally fine.
but it's in the
Yep.
last couple episodes of Better Call Saul, which are airing now. And I'm in, I think, the second to last episode with a pretty big guest star, um, spoiler part. So I'm pretty excited about that, because it's
Awesome.
in the world of Better Call Saul, which I think is a great television show, and Vince Gilligan directed my episode. So it's a big episode for them and their world, and I'm apparently a big part of it. So I'm really excited about that. Um,
Awesome.
and then I've got a big podcast that I produce that's coming out sometime in October, called Something in the Water, that's about concentrations of highly successful athletes from a given location, and the Athletic is involved in that, and so it'll be a big to do on the podcast world.
Cool.
So I'm excited about that.
That sounds awesome. I
Yeah,
love I work in sports medicine,
you
and so
do.
I'm like anything sports, I'm like, oh, fun.
Yeah,
I will check that out for sure.
it's like this. It's a really, I think, an interesting idea, in the sense that like it's almost like a socialization look at
Mm,
sports, as opposed to like a sports podcast. It's almost like something you'd hear like from Freakonomics, except it has a sports tint to it. So it's kind of looking at why these
cool.
people who all were uber successful came from this area. So we have this small town in
Hmm.
Minnesota that has produced an inordinate amount of NHL hockey players, and um,
Ooh.
like Dominican Republic baseball players, and because of the access through the Athletic, we've gotten to talk to some pretty cool people. I mean, we're doing an episode on women's soccer that we got that's around New Jersey. We got to talk to like a couple of U.S. women's national team players, a couple of pretty famous coaches. That episode
Cool.
is crazy, mind blowing for like why the women's soccer showed up in New Jersey. It's like all these immigration factors, and kind of all these different factors came together to kind of produce this little hotbed of soccer talent that produced
Mm,
an inordinate amount of women's national soccer team players. So um, it's a
cool.
cool podcast, and I'm really excited about it, really proud of it, and
Hmm.
excited for people to hear that and see what people think.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have any final words of wisdom or words of advice? That's such a loaded question. No pressure.
No, I mean, I told you I'm just an idiot on the internet, so I don't know
Yeah, right.
anybody. I don't feel I should be giving anybody any advice on really anything. But this has been a lot of fun, and it's just great to talk acting, and nerd out on acting, because I think that, like I said, it's the seed of everything. And so, when you talk about where do you get inspired, I get inspired by being around actors and getting to act and getting to, be on sets and do it professionally. It is the fuel for all of my creative endeavors. So, thanks for the opportunity to chat acting, because at least for today, I'll be all up. I'll probably go make an Instagram story with me air guitaring or something, which is usually what I do.
I'm like, so, this is a good day. Yeah, I feel the same way. Yeah, I feel the same way. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and thank you, Alvin, for being my guest this week. Thank you for being the guest that kicks off 2023. I knew that there was no story better to kick off a new year than yours. It is absolutely incredible. I'm so excited for your career so far and where the career is going. Thank you so much for sharing your story and advice and inspiration with me and with all of my listeners. Oh, I appreciate you so much. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and I hope you'll join me next week for another episode of Second Act Actors. Bye!